Good morning, students. Welcome to the lecture of real analysis. In the last lecture, we have studied an important theorem named implicit function theorem. This theorem is actually giving us the interpretation or the concept or the idea regarding whether an implicit function is being converted to an explicit form. And though it is the function of two variables, one equation in two variables, it will be actually difficult to convert this implicit form of function to an explicit one. It needs some extra conditions in order to convert it. Therefore, it will be having the same kind of structure for the multivariable vector valued function. Therefore, here we are going to understand the criteria for converting an implicit function form to an explicit format for the multivariable vector valued function. Therefore, the function under the consideration was given to us to be an n-tuple vector valued function. That is, f is from having the coordinate functions f1 to fn be the vector valued function, and it is defined on an open set S in Rn plus k. Therefore, with this first statement, we can understand very easily that the nature of the function is of the type Rn plus k to Rn. Rn plus k to Rn. That is, the function is defined on n plus k dimensional spaces, and the resultant is an n dimensional space. Also, it is given that the function belongs to C1. Belongs to C1 means the function is continuously differentiable. Also, there exists one point, say x naught t naught in the domain S, for which the function is 0. That is, f of x naught t naught is equals to 0. This is the implicit form of the function for the point x naught t naught. And at this point, we were going to discuss whether some of the variables in this, there are in all n plus k variables. Now, we were going to discuss whether some of the variables can be written in terms of the remaining variables. And also it is given that the n cross n determinant, that is Jacobian determinant djfi at this point x naught t naught is non-zero, and our aim is to prove that there exists a k-dimensional open set t naught containing a small point t naught and one and only one vector valued function g defined on this capital T naught having values in Rn such that we want to prove g belongs to C1, that is, whatever the g we were defining is also a continuously differentiable function, and g t naught is equals to x naught. Therefore, some of the variables are expressed in terms of remaining. For x naught, these are actually n variables. Okay, x we are taking a vector belonging to Rn space. T we were considering a vector belonging to Rk space. These n variables are written in terms of the remaining k variables. Therefore, this is the explicit form of the function. At which point this is? This is at the point x naught t naught at which the Jacobian determinant is given to be non-zero. Also, it was written f of g of t comma t is equals to 0. That is, whatever x we were writing, if the function I write in as f of xt, then this x is equals to gt we were going to write. And this is true for every point in the t naught. For this, what we were going to do, actually our aim is to use the inverse function theorem in order to prove that inverse function theorem is being used for the space or the functions of the type Rn to Rn. That is, dimensions of domain and codomain space are same. But here, if we observe in the statement itself, here the function is defined from Rn plus k to Rn. That is, dimensions of domain and codomain space are not same. Are not same. Therefore, what we will do, we will try to construct a new function, say capital F, with the help of this small f function, such that the codomain space is also having the dimensions to be Rn plus k. Therefore, this capital F is defined as first n coordinate functions are taken as the coordinate functions of a small f function, and the remaining we are going to consider it as an f function, and the function capital F is defined as fm of capital F suffix m xt is small fm of xt for first n variables, and for the remaining n plus k variables, f n plus m is defined to be tn. If I write this, the nature of the function is of this type. Capital F of xt is f1, f2 to fn and t1, t2 to tk, where this I of t is defined to be ip is equals to t. Therefore, first n coordinates are the coordinate functions of small f function, and the remaining k coordinates are the scalar values of the vector t. Therefore, the function contribute a vector x, t1 to tk, which contributes a vector t. Therefore, in all there are n plus k variables. Okay. Therefore, if we consider the partial derivative with respect to each of the variable, the partial derivative we were going to denote by these symbol. Partial derivative with respect to x1 will be denoted by d1. Partial derivative with respect to x2 denoted by d2 till partial derivative of xn is denoted by tn. This t1 is actually n plus 1th variable in this vector. Therefore, partial derivative with respect to t1 is denoted by dn plus 1. With respect to t2, dn plus 2. With respect to tk, this is dn plus k. dn plus k. Therefore, this is the function. Now, our aim is to find out the Jacobian value, Jacobian determinant value for this new function capital F. For this new function capital F. Therefore, we have written this is the Jacobian determinant. Okay. First row is the partial derivative of f1 function with respect to all n plus k variable. Second is partial derivative of f2 with respect to the n plus k variable. Similarly, nth row is the partial derivative of fn with respect to all n plus k variables. Next, it comes out to be partial derivatives of t1 with respect to all the variables 2. The last row is partial derivatives of tk with respect to all the variables. But as we know, t1, t2, tk are the variables. Therefore, the derivatives of this t1 with respect to other variables must be 0. And what about the derivatives of f1 with respect to t1? It is also 0, no? This is also 0. Therefore, this, if I divide the Jacobian determinant into 4 parts, this first part is actually the Jacobian determinant with respect to small f function. This partial derivative of f1 with respect to this t1, t2 to tk will be 0. Similarly, partial derivatives of all the remaining functions with respect to t1, t2 to tk is 0. Therefore, this is a 0 matrix. This section is a 0 matrix. Similarly, if I concentrate on this section, this is the partial derivatives of t1 with respect to x1, x2 to xn. Now, as we know, all these x1 to xn and t1 to tk are the independent variables. Therefore, derivative of t1 with respect to these n variables will be 0. What about this value? dn plus
Identity
1.
matrix.
This is 1. This value is 1 actually. Why this is so? Because dn plus 1 is actually a partial derivative with respect to t1 itself. Therefore, partial derivative of t1 with respect to t1 is 1. But all the rest terms in this row is 0. Therefore, whatever this section we were going to understand, in this section, all diagonal entries will be 1. Because if we observe this last entry, dn plus k is actually tk. Therefore, partial derivative of tk with respect to tk is 1. But partial derivative of this tk with respect to all the remaining variables will be 0 because all these are my independent variables. Therefore, this section is 0 matrix, this section is 0 matrix, this section is an identity matrix. Therefore, what kind of Jacobian matrix we have obtained? This is the format we have obtained. And if we write, this will be Jacobian determinant of small f, 0 matrix, identity matrix. And if we evaluate according to the determinant properties, these two values are going to be same. Jacobian determinant with respect to capital F is equal to Jacobian determinant with respect to small f. Therefore, here we have written the explanation that the last k rows, k columns is jfxt, which is what we have written here initially, and cross indeterminate because the entries which appear in the entries is the word missing. The entries which appear in the last k rows and last columns of jf of xt forms k by k determinant. Last k rows k means this section, no? And therefore, this is going to form once along the main diagonal, zeros elsewhere. Once along the main diagonal and zeros elsewhere. Therefore, it is an identity matrix. The intersection of first n rows and n columns is the Jacobian determinant of the small f function, and all the rest entries are 0. Okay. Therefore, if the Jacobian determinant with respect to small f at the point x naught t naught is given to be non-zero, therefore the value carried out same for capital F. The Jacobian determinant at the point x naught t naught for the capital F function is again non-zero. Now we will try to understand what is the value of capital F at the point x naught t naught. We know capital F is defined like this, which is actually first n coordinates are small f function, remaining are the t1 to tk coordinates. These are actually the, if we fix that scalar, it will be the, if we fix the vector t, it will be the scalar, or otherwise these are the these are the k variables t1 to tk. Therefore, if we just operate f on x naught t naught, actually it is operated by each coordinate function. These are the variables kept as it is. Therefore, if we just observe the value f1 x naught t naught, f2 x naught t naught, fn x naught t naught is 0, because it is given f of x naught t naught is 0. And for how many values it is? I equals to f of x naught t naught 0 implies f I. Yes, for I equals to 1 to f. Each coordinate function I equals to 1. So for the value of capital F at the point x naught t naught, we have obtained at 0 t naught, and we have denoted by x. So in the first step, we have constructed capital F. We have found the value of its Jacobian. We have found the value of this capital F at the point x naught t naught. Now in the second step, we were going to use inverse function theorem. We were going to construct the inverse function g, and we were going to understand how this g behaves. So let us, I have written the statement of inverse function in short. There exist two open sets x and y such that a belongs to x, f of a belongs to y, y equal to f of x, g of f of x is equals to x, and g belongs to c1. If I just use this in order to write, there exist two open sets x and y containing the point. Now this plays a role of a is in x, a is in x now, a is in x, therefore this is a. Why this I am taking a? Because a is the point in the statement, a is the point in the statement at which Jacobian determinant is given to be non-zero. Now in our statement, Jacobian determinant is given to be non-zero at the point x naught t naught. Therefore this is my point a in the statement. Now if a is in x, then its f image. What is the f image of x naught t naught? Already we have proved it is 0 t naught. It is in y. Correct now? Here I have written x naught t naught is in x. Its f image, which is 0 t naught, is in y. Also, capital F is 1 on f of x is equals to y. Now we were writing the existence of an inverse function g defined on y, having the values in x. Why the values are in x? Because g is the function defined from y to x. Why? Because f we have defined from x to y. This is the function. Now, and the statement tells us g belongs to C1. Now, capital G is a function we have defined from again Rn plus k to Rn plus k. Therefore, in order to understand the behavior of the components, we will just write this in terms of components. One component, we will write G in terms of two different components. One vector valued function is in Rn space, another vector valued function W is in Rk space. Therefore, V equals to V1 to Vn, be a vector valued function defined on y with values in Rn. That of W is defined with values in Rk. Now we know g of f of xt is xt. Therefore, knowing g is Vw, let us operate Vw on f of xt. This gives us v of f of xt comma w of f of xt equal to xt, equating the coordinate. Here I cannot say coordinate wise. Here we just equate. Okay, why we cannot say coordinate wise? Because these are not the coordinates. These are just the bifurcation we have made in the n plus k tuple vector. How we have separated this n tuple vector and k tuple vector. Okay, so just having this equating, we can say v of f of xt is x, w of f of xt is t. Let me call it as 2. But here from this we are unable to understand the nature, how v behaves if it operates on an arbitrary point xt. To understand this, now we were going to use the nature onto for every point xt in y, because as f is the function defined from x to y, if I take xt to be an arbitrary point in y, then there exists a preimage. What the preimage is? X dash t dash, right now? Such that xt is f image of x dash t dash, because the function is 1, 1. Okay. Therefore, xt is f of x dash t dash. Now we'll try to understand how this is going to give you the value t equals to t dash. Let us see. Xt, let me write coordinate wise. X written in terms of n coordinates, t written in terms of k coordinates, f can be written as a two-tuple vector, I can call fi. Then by operating here we can see very easily that t is equal to t dash. Now in order to understand how components of g behaves, let us operate v on xt. Xt is f of x dash t dash, but already we have seen t dash is equals to t. Therefore here I can write v of f of x dash t. But we have seen if v operates on f of xt, it will collect x coordinate. If w operate on f of xt, it will collect t coordinate. Therefore here v operated on f of x dash t takes x coordinate, that is x dash. W operated on f of x dash t takes t coordinate. So we have obtained definition. V of xt is x dash, W of xt is t dash, t, which is equation number 3. Hence we have found how VW behaves. Now one can find out very easily how G behaves. Therefore, taking an arbitrary point xt and y, let us operate G. G is VW. VW operated on xt is V of xt, W of xt. But we have found V of xt is x dash, W of xt is t. Therefore, G of xt is x dash t, and this is actually behavior of a function g when operated on arbitrary point xt in S subset of Rn plus. Right? Therefore, here it was clear that how G behaves, capital G, which is actually inverse. Now taking f image on both the sides, what we have obtained? The left side is f of g of xt, which is xt, which gives me f of x dash of t. But x dash is, what is x dash? V of xt we have already proved. Let me call it as statement number 4. In the second step, what we have written, we have used inverse function theorem. We have given the existence of g. First, we have written g in terms of components, and we have found how the components VW behaves. Once we understand how VW behaves, we can easily check how G behaves. And knowing the nature of G, we have found this statement f of V of xt comma t equal to xt. This is important for the sake of proving one of the point in the statement. Now it's a time to define the set T naught. This is T, collection of T vectors in Rk. This vector we are selecting in such a way that whenever 0 T is in Y, we will be selecting those T in the space T naught. And we are going to define small g of T as V of 0 T. Therefore, V is the coordinate function of G, which is an n-tuple vector. Now this set T naught is open because Y is already open. Now we want to prove G belongs to C1, that is continuously differentiable. But this G we have constructed with the help of coordinate function of capital G. But capital G is already continuously differentiable function. Therefore, each component is continuously differentiable. And this G we have taken to be V function. Now we have defined G of T, V of 0, T. Now this V belongs to C1 I can write because capital G belongs to C1. But if V belongs to C1, this small g also belongs to C1. Second point, G T naught is equals to X naught. We want to prove. Okay. But what we know from by statement number 1, f of X naught T naught is equals to 0 T naught. Okay. Now this 0 T naught is in Y because X naught T naught is in X. Function f is defined from X to Y. Now this 0 T naught is in Y. That's why we can write T naught is in T naught. Small T naught is in capital T naught. If small T naught is in capital T naught, according to the function, G of T is V of 0, T naught. Let us find what is the value of V of 0, T naught. Therefore, I have written 0 T naught is f of X naught T naught from statement number 1. Let us take T on both the sides. Let us take V on both the sides. If I take V on both the sides, it gives you G of T naught is equal to X naught. Third point, we want to prove f of G of T, T is equals to 0. For this, let us use this statement number 4, which we have proved in step number 2. And we will just write it in terms of components. If I write it in terms of components, capital F is written as F1 to Fn, T1 to Tk. On the right also I have written the components. And if we just equate the components, first we m coordinates, it gives you fi of v of xt comma t is xi, and in the vector form we can write f of v of xt is equal to t. Let us put x is equals to 0, it gives you f of v of 0 t is equals to 0. The reason behind putting x equals to 0 is because g of t we have already defined as v of 0 comma t. Therefore, we have kept x is equals to 0, which proves a third point. Now, the last point remains uniqueness of the function g. Uniqueness is readily true because the function is f is 1. This is how we have proved an implicit function theorem. I hope there is no difficulty up to this. Now, we were going to discuss extrema of real valued functions. Extrema of real valued functions of one variable. Extrema of real valued functions of one variable. Now, after the discussion we have made, suppose if f of x is given to be a function of the type R2R. R2R means it is one variable and this is real value. Correct? Na? Real value. And if someone wants to find out the extrema for this function, okay, what we were doing for finding the extrema, stepwise process. First step, we were finding f dash of x. Number 2, equate f dash of x to 0. Number 3, find the points. Find the points at which f dash of x is equal to 0. Say x is equal to c. Say x is equal to c. Then number 4 step we were doing, find second order derivative f double dash of x. Then check the nature of f double dash of x at x equal to c. Okay, and if f double dash of c is greater than 0, function is minima at x equal to c. If f double dash of c less than 0, function is maxima at x equal to c. Okay, this is what the process is. This is what we have used. We have solved examples by using this methodology. And before going to understand the geometrical interpretation of this part, I'll just give you one function and you just tell me the answer. Let me give you one function, say f of x equal to x cube. Let us follow the process. What is the first order derivative?
3x square, 3x square.
3x square. Let me equate this first order derivative to 0. What it gives me? 3x square is equals to 0. What is the point we have found at which f dash x is 0? X is equal to 0. Correct, na? Therefore, what I will call? C, na? The point I will call as C. Now, let us find f double dash of x. Yes, what is f double dash of x? 6x. What is the value of f double dash of c? Put in c equal to 0. It is 0. What is the nature of the function then? Maxima or minima? The function will not give any information about maxima and minima. About maxima and minima. Correct now? Let us check why it is not giving us the nature. Can anyone tell me what is the graph of the function x cube? Yes? How you should tell me? How can you tell? Na? Is it of this type? Correct, na?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Y equal to x cube, the nature of the function is of this type. Okay. Actually, this is a slope. I was unable to draw it neatly. Somewhat like this, y equal to x cube. Now, by getting first order derivative 0, we have obtained the point c equals to 0, that is origin. This is my c point, no? This is the point c at which we have found the value. But if I look at the curve, at this point c, it is neither minimum nor maximum. This is a point in between the curve. No? If I restrict the domain to be somewhere like this, then this will be maxima and this point will be minima. Therefore, this is not giving us any information. We cannot say maxima minima exist. Maxima minima do exist, remember. But whatever this methodology we have used, this methodology enables to give us any information about the maxima and minima. Therefore, whatever we have written these steps are actually the necessary condition for the extrema of the function, not the sufficient condition. Okay. Therefore, these steps are necessary conditions, are necessary but not sufficient. Necessary condition for a function to have local extrema. Again, this is the second point, local extrema and global extrema. Local extremum at an interior point C of an interval such that f dash of c is equal to 0, provided that f dash c exists. Now our aim is to find out what is the sufficient condition. Here I will write this condition, however, is not sufficient. Therefore, in our syllabus, our aim is to find out what is the sufficient condition. However, is not sufficient. However, is not sufficient. Now we will move towards the geometrical interpretation. Today we are unable to complete. I will just give you the hint. Okay. Whenever we are equating first order derivative of the function to 0, what we were doing actually? Yes, someone has told me the answer. Suppose this is my curve. Okay. For this f of x, if we are finding f dash of x is equals to 0, a point at which f dash of x is equals to 0, that is we are interested or we are finding a point at which slope of the tangent is 0. Correct, na? Slope
Yes,
of
ma'am.
the tangent is 0. Now here, this is the point, say, at which we were getting the tangent which has the slope 0. Tangent is having the slope 0 means the line is parallel to x-axis. Okay, and this is the point at which we are getting x equals to c is the point at which we were getting tangents. Therefore, first we were collecting those points. Okay, if suppose the nature of my curve is somewhat like a sine curve. If suppose the nature of my curve is of this type. Okay. Therefore, for this point, what we will do? we will collect all the points at which the tangent slope of the tangent is 0. Therefore, these are the points, no? These are the points at which the tangents are 0. Now our aim is to find at these points whether the nature of the function is maxima or minima. If we look at this curve very easily, this will be the maxima. This is also maxima. This is also a maxima. What about these remaining below points? At these points we will get the minima. At these points we will get the minima. But how? Okay. Again, the concept is about local extrema and global extrema. Do anyone know local extrema, global extrema? Let me just share you this window which I searched on Google. Just tell me just whether the screen is visible to you.
Yes, ma'am.
Wikipedia screen, is it visible to everyone?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
And now look at this animation. Look at this animation very carefully. Tangent line goes along the curve. That is tangent at the points. If all the points we draw, then this will be the tangent positions. Now, here the line starts with blue color, then red, then it turns green. Again, the green turns red, then blue. Again, this blue will turn red and then green. It is going to be red at the point, at these points only. Na? See here it is 0, pi by 2, and pi. Okay, so at these points, the tangent becomes red color, means actually this red color are my inflection points. Inflection points means the point at which the nature of your curve changes. Concave up to concave down. Concave down to concave up. Wherever the nature of the curve changes, this is called as the inflection point. And this blue color line is showing you actually the nature of the curve is concave up. And this is green color is nature of the curve is concave down. Okay. Now second order derivative actually gives us. Is the screen visible? My screen now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
If I want to find out second order derivative, we know already that the first order derivative is the slope of the tangent. Correct? Is the slope of the tangent. Therefore, if I take one more derivative, then this will be rate of change. Rate of change of slope of tangent. This is rate of change of slope of tangent. That is how the slope of tangent behaves. How the slope of tangent behaves. And if I am writing f double dash of x is greater than 0, that is changing rate of change of the slope of tangent is positive. That is slope of the tangent is increasing. Look at this type of curve. Okay. Now what I'll do, I'll just mark the tangents at every point. I'll mark the tangent at this point. I will take a tangent at this point now. Now I will take a tangent at this point. Look at all the tangent points. The first point, second point, and third point. Now let us understand the nature of their slopes. This is say theta 1, point of inclination. This is theta 2 and this is theta 3. Therefore, what we observe in theta 1, theta 2 and theta 3, whether the inclination increases?
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Therefore,
ma'am.
if I take tan theta 1, tan theta 2, what will happen? This also increases, na? Okay. Therefore, slope of rate of change of slope of tangent is increasing. So whenever second order derivative is greater than 0, the nature of the curve is concave up. The nature of the curve is concave up. And whenever we write f double dash of x is less than 0, that is rate of change of slope of tangent is decreasing. That is slope of the tangent is decreasing. Let us check how. Okay, now look at the curve of this type. This is the curve set. Now let us draw the tangent at every point. At this point, it is difficult. Okay, now let us draw the tangent at the points. Let me draw the tangent here. At this point, I have drawn the tangent. Let me draw a tangent here now. At this point, I have drawn a tangent. Let us draw a tangent at this point. Tangent at this point. Now check the inclinations. Check the inclinations. Here it is theta 1, first point, then theta 2, then theta 3. Whether the slope of inclinations are increasing or decreasing?
Decreasing.
Decreasing. Theta 1 greater than theta 2 greater than theta 3. Therefore, what about their slopes? Slopes are also decreasing. Why this is so? We have taken f double dash x is less than 0. That is slope of tangents is decreasing. Therefore, what will be the nature of the curve in this case? The nature of the curve is concave down. Therefore, second order derivative tells us the rate of change of slope of tangent. Therefore, if it is positive, nature of the curve is concave up. If it is negative, the nature of the curve is concave down. Okay, concave down and f double and the first order derivative we are finding 0. Then what kind of? This is concave down, and this is the point at which first order derivative is 0. Therefore, at this point, surely may I see this is the maxima of the curve. And if I check concave up curve, and we are finding a point at which first order derivative is 0, that is the tangent is parallel to x-axis. Therefore, surely at this point the function is going to be minima. This is maxima. Is it understood slowly?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now in the next lecture, what we will do, we will see what is the definition of a critical point, inflection point, local minima, global minima, local extrema, and global extreme. Okay. Till now, we will stop for today. You just think on the points which I have told you in today's lecture. If you have any difficulties, you can unmute yourself and ask me. Are you getting my justification? Second order derivative greater than 0, how it works, less than 0, how it works.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
In the next lecture, we will take the detailed part again. Okay. Thank you for being with me for today's lecture. If you have the difficulties, you can ask. If not, shall I stop for today? Thank you.